Hello, the name is Daniel, and welcome to this little tier list video here. I did this last year with the 2021 anime, and it was a bit smaller than this one by about 20 anime or so. But basically going to be the same thing. I'm just going to be going through all of the anime that I watched, seasonal-wise, not every single anime that I watched. Obviously, I watched some stuff that was before 2022 in terms of release date. But just all the stuff that released in 2022 that I watched and finished. So, when I say finished, I also mean stuff like Blue Lock and To Your Eternity Season 2 are not going to be on here, simply because they are not done, and I cannot judge them properly until they are done. So let's just get right onto it. These are in no specific order, it's just whatever order the files that I downloaded happen to be in. But we got Shield Hero Season 2 first up. I wasn't, like, too crazy on Shield Hero Season 1. It was like a decent, like, 7 out of 10. Not the worst isekai ever, not the best. But Season 2 was not too grand. I would say it probably D tier here for Shield Hero Season 2. I don't care that much about the shitty CGI turtle. It's not like the end of the world for me in that regard. I don't care that much about CGI unless it's like absolutely horrendous, which we'll get to at some point on this list. But basically, I'd say it was just really fast in what it was trying to do, and I was not as interested in the content that it was presenting to me. I think a lot of the intrigue from Season 1 came with the revenge plotline or so, and without that, it's just kind of like, okay, we can move on from everyone else being incompetent, and our boy being, like, the only one good at his job. But yeah, I just was not too interested in what was going on. World's still, like, generally interesting. I'll continue to watch it. I don't drop things, unfortunately, for myself, but hopefully Season 3 will be better. I think it might have hurt it a little bit as well to do split core. We waited for a pretty long time for this just to have, like, okay quality, I guess, in terms of animation. I guess the turtle really took it out of him, but it just wasn't up to standard. And next up, we have Puchi Seka, which is just like a little chibi short that you could go watch on YouTube if you really wanted. It's the anime for the Project Sekai game, but yeah, I can't say it's bad, I can't say it's good, just like a little, it's just chibi short, you know, it's fun to watch if you play the game. I don't really play it anymore. I play a gacha game that I will talk about a little bit later in here, actually, not too far away now, but yeah, I just don't really play the game that much anymore, but it was fun to watch with some friends of mine who do play the game more consistently than I do. So yeah, goofy little short. If you like Project Sekai, Colorful World, or whatever, you can go watch that, and you'll have a fun time with it, probably. Next up, we have the second season of Arifureta. It could not get much worse than the first season. I didn't really like the first season in any capacity. I would say the second season was honestly like probably like a high D tier, maybe like a lower C. It was like a solid 5 out of 10, I'd say. It's entertaining content generally, and it did do some things that I actually liked, surprisingly, but I still don't think it breaks out of, you know, the typical just a power fantasy harem, you know. It's nothing too special. I'm not too interested in anything that's going on. It was definitely a step up from the first season, which I'd say is probably a solid F tier, but it's not bad. It had good music too. Opening and ending were an absolute slapper. So at the very least, we got that. A lot of bad anime have good music. I'm really happy that this had something worthwhile, worth my time, I suppose. But speaking of worth my time was Made in Abyss Season 2, and that's going to be going into the absolute S tier. I have made a video on Made in Abyss, so you can go watch that if you want to know all my full thoughts on it, because I obviously cannot spend too much time on any specific anime here, unless like I really get into a specific talking point, I suppose. But I got 70 of these fuckers to go through, so I got a little bit of time. But basically, Made in Abyss Season 2 was absolutely incredible. It's my anime of the year. I've said it in a couple of videos by now, either just on the podcast or when I was doing my Crunchyroll voting on here. But yeah, Made in Abyss Season 2. If you haven't seen Season 1, I suggest doing that. And then, you know, of course, there's the movie, which is also great. It's just all really good content. Great music. Hopefully it wins some awards at the Crunchyroll Anime Awards for what it was nominated for, because it's just such an incredible experience. Now, next up we have Date A Live Season 4. I binged the entirety of Date A Live in preparation for this. I did not expect to particularly enjoy it, but it's good fun. I enjoy the characters and their interactions. It's not like groundbreaking or anything, but it's an interesting world with good character designs. I think the character design is definitely a big part. Now, my thing with Season 4 is I think the studio changed the art style was good for just the, you know, general anime, but the fights were mainly CGI, and it looked pretty bad, which is unfortunate. Not that Data Live's fights have ever been, like, too flashy, but it's just, it was super noticeable. Just anytime they were flying, especially, was just, and most of the time is spent flying. All of them can fly, basically, so it's just a lot of CGI, and it just was not engaging. Hopefully Season 5 does a little bit better. Maybe they're just trying to, like, reestablish Data Live as something that exists, and Season 5 will be a bit better in that regard. But I can't say it was anything better than, like, a C tier. Maybe, like, a higher C tier. It was, like, a solid 7 out of 10 season, I think. I think it's the best season so far, probably. The most interesting one, but the animation for the fights just was not there. It was, like, negative budget. But next up, we have World's End Harem. I can't really... I don't even know where... Just, like, either the lowest D possible or just an F. Probably an F. It's not good. It was entertaining to watch weekly, I suppose. But I would not ever want to binge it, I guess, is what I would say here. It's, you know... It was... I didn't watch it because it was going to be good. I watched it for other reasons. And so I got my... I got my money's worth, I guess, out of that. I feel really bad for anyone who tried to watch it on Crunchyroll. I don't think they had an uncensored version, but their censored version was really bad. So, you know, it was, I got what I expected, I suppose. Now, next up, we have Cyberpunk Edgerunners. I'd say it's like a solid A tier. I think what really held it back for me was the ending, and I am going to talk about this in a video that I'm currently writing. I'm going to be going over the top 10 best new anime from the 2022 year in more detail than this. This is just like speed run, talk about it real quick, what I liked, what I didn't like type of stuff. Cyberpunk, great animation, obviously. Trigger generally does a good job. You never really need to expect anything outside the box from them, but you go in knowing they're going to have some funky animation in their art style that they always incorporate. But Cyberpunk generally was good. I think that it did what it was trying to do with the character stuff that I was into and I digged, but I think the way they went about it to conclude it was not my favorite, and once again, I'll go over that in more detail in a future video. And I think I went over it a bit on the podcast as well, link in the description for that, when we voted for Crunchyroll stuff. But yeah, it's not my favorite ending, but it was still a good show regardless. Now next up we have another isekai here with Bookworm. But World of Bookworm is probably the most interesting thing. I'd say it's like a solid, like, B-tier isekai. The art style is nothing insane, animation's nothing too crazy, but it's an enjoyable isekai where there's some things in there that I'm not the biggest fan of, but there are things in there that make a lot of sense that a lot of isekai don't do. And I think it makes for a much more interesting, you know, isekai in general, and makes for an interesting fantasy world that actually, like, incorporates its isekai into the world instead of just having it to explain things as, like, a story beat. Now, next up, we have another little fantasy. Sorry. We had another little fantasy gacha game as well. This is what I was talking about earlier. And Princess Connect Redive, second season. I would put it, like, a very high B tier, maybe even A. It's, I'll put it in the high B tier, I suppose. The story's nothing insane, or the characters aren't incredible or anything, but the animation was really, really great this season. I cannot understate how amazing it was. It should have gotten nominated for a Crunchyroll award, honestly. I don't know how the first season did and this season didn't, especially with some of the other things that were in that tier. But I guess not as many people watched it, and it just wasn't sponsored by Princess Connect either, so. But basically, if you haven't seen any of Princess Connect, honestly, it's like Konosuba, but different, I guess. It's more serious, I say, than Konosuba, but it still has the comedy in there. Second season, obviously, a lot more serious than the first one. The first one is definitely like Konosuba Light, and the second, I would say, is just its own thing. But I really enjoy it. I love the game as well. I'm probably slowly getting out of it in terms of, like, playing it in a more serious manner with, like, clan battles and stuff. But I still enjoy the game and do my dailies and such, so I'm still on the chain for it, But next up, we have Rent-A-Girlfriend Season 2. I cannot understate how much of a pain in the ass it was to watch this. I did speed it up, which is like a cardinal sin for me. I think it's a completely dishonest thing to watch things in a faster speed. I already read the manga for this, and I did not give a shit about the content at all. So I watched it a little bit faster than intended. And yeah, it's as terrible as I remember. There's like one okay part in Rent-A-Girlfriend, and we haven't gotten to that yet. And whenever we do, after it's gone, it's just all downhill from there. It's the only thing I've ever dropped. And it's only paused, I guess. I'll pick it up when it's done. But I just can't take reading that shit weekly. It's so awful. And the anime is just as bad. The main character is probably the most insufferable main character in all of anime and manga, honestly. Just in terms of, like, absolute stupidity. It's pretty unbearable. But next up, we have something that's not unbearable with Kaguya Season 3, Ultra Romantic. One of my other picks for anime of the year, maybe right behind Made in Abyss. Kaguya, I've completed the manga for it. It's a series that I really like. It's just good. It's Season 3 of Kaguya. If you don't know what Kaguya is by now, you've been living under a rock. You know what it is. You know why it's good. So I don't need to linger too much on it. Season 3 was just really good. It's just what we expect from Kaguya, but they up the ante every time. Just, everyone does a great job with animating this. And its comedy style is something I'll talk about a little bit later. Another anime that's going to be coming up. But it's just such a delight to watch that kind of visual comedy. Especially when it's done as well as Kaguya does it. Now, next up we have Q, which is actually an anime about voice acting, or the world of voice actresses, I suppose, because a lot more goes on than just like step into the booth and do your stuff. They have other things they need to do, like right there you can kind of see them in the idol dresses, I suppose. But that's something that voice actresses do, especially like the newer ones. Something to make a little money on the side, because you can't especially if you're just starting out. Making money only from voice acting probably isn't going to work because it's difficult to get roles. You can be the best voice actor in Japan, and you're not going to get every role. That's just how it is. So it's a very difficult thing, and I think it's interesting to see kind of the world of that stuff. It's not 100% accurate, obviously, it's anime, and there's very anime-type moments in there. You gotta have the drama. I think it also tries to focus on way too many characters. There are 16 of them, 16 main characters, so there's a lot going on, and you won't feel as attached to all of them as you might some others. But I still think it was an interesting watch, and I don't regret watching it. It was fun. You get some songs in there as well. I think it was an overall good experience, but I would probably just put it in the C tier. Now, next up, we have Chainsaw Man. And Chainsaw Man, I went and read the manga afterward, and it's probably my favorite shonen right now, overall. But I would say it's probably like an A tier. Just later season content, I'll probably, it has a chance to definitely move up. But it was definitely very fun to watch. I made a video on it as well recently, very recently. Maybe a little later than I would have liked, and the YouTube algorithm would have liked, but I made it anyway just because I liked the series, and even if it wasn't the perfect time, I wanted to make a video on it anyway. I kind of got derailed by the flu for a while. It kind of like killed my motivation to make things, so I was just out of commission because my voice was absolutely shot for a while. But next up, we have Slow Loop. Didn't want to spend too much time on Chainsaw Man. If you know what Chainsaw Man is if you watched it. If you haven't watched it, then I'd highly suggest it if you like shonen. But Slow Loop was probably like one of my surprises of the year. And I'll talk a little bit more about it in a second here with Bocchi the Rock. But Slow Loop was just very comfy. And I'd say it's like a C, I'll put it like a low B tier. It was just, I loved watching it every week. It was just comfortable. A goofy little anime about fishing. Cute girls do cute things. There's nothing that can go wrong with that. It's just a very comfortable experience. You're not going to really experience any drama. You just go and you do goofy fishing stuff. And it's pretty educational as well. It teaches you how to fish, how to cook the fish. It's very, very fun. I like Slow Loop. If you like that type of stuff, then I highly suggest watching it. You won't get anything bad. You won't lose anything from watching it. You're just going to have a comfortable experience. Sit back, relax in bed or something. Put it on the TV, the phone, whatever you do. And just relax to Slow Loop. But next up we have Shikamori. It was fine, I guess. I would say it's a C tier. There were a lot of people who ended up hating this anime because of the main character, which I guess I kind of get. I wasn't as annoyed with it as like other people, I suppose, but it wasn't that great regardless. It was just a perfectly fine anime. You kind of get the same thing every week. Wasn't too engaging, wasn't too disinteresting, but I just wasn't like too into it overall. Wasn't the greatest anime of all time or anything. I think it definitely suffered as well from the hype that it got over the main girl. It's just an unfortunate recipe for a disaster when it comes to something that's not like over the top incredible. Just a little bit of overhype that I don't know if anyone could have seen coming, but it's very unfortunate. Now next up we have the first season, I believe, yeah, that's the first season of Orient. Dear Lord, I hated Orient. If you've listened to the podcast in any regard, you will know how much I despise this anime. It is an easy F tier, one of the lowest rated things on my list. I fucking hate this anime and everything it stands for. You'll see more background diversity on Planet Namek than you will in Orient. And I'm not gonna go too in depth in this because there's a second part to Orient coming up on this list somewhere. But I could not stand this anime. It is like everything I hate about shonen wrapped into one package that just somehow makes it even worse. And yeah, if you listen to the podcast in regard, I've talked about Ori too much in there. I don't want to discuss it on here. It is just really bad to me. There are probably people who like it, and if you do, congratulations. I can't get into it. Now next up we have When Will Ayumi Make His Move? I've read the manga for this, or at least I'm caught up to it. It's not done yet. It probably needs to end. It's been going on for a little too long, and it's kind of dragging on a bit. I would say it's probably like a D tier. I think the manga is a lot better at, it's just a simple like little quick weekly read. It just doesn't really work as well in anime format, and they basically just like, you know, kind of copy paste the manga in a way. I didn't really feel there was anything ever added to it. It wasn't an enhanced experience. It was just the manga but animated, and I didn't really feel they took advantage of the anime format to maybe make things a bit more interesting between the characters. It was just a fine adaptation. I suggest the manga if you are interested in the series at all. It's from the same author plus artist as Takagi. So yeah, I mean, it's a fine experience. It's just not anything incredible. I do like the ED though. It's a very fun ED. Now next up we have, what was the full title of this anime? It was The Genius Prince Guide to Saving His Country from Debt, or something to that regard, which ended up being better than I thought, but still kind of not that great. I'd say it's like a lower C tier. I think it was like generally entertaining to watch weekly after, it was like the first few weeks probably that I didn't care for it that much, but it got better over time. Nothing incredible. It was just a fine watch, I suppose. And it also had to, it was like the same anime as something that should be on this list, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, we'll get to it eventually, I believe. But yeah, it was just fine, I guess. That's the only thing I can really say about it. Maybe, yeah, okay, it is on this list. I see it though. We'll get to it in a wee while later. But yeah, it's just an alright fantasy. Nothing too crazy. Generally fun character interactions. It's kind of like the typical big brain anime type of thing, but it's nothing like too crazy. But next up we have Danmachi Season 4 Part 1. Part 2 is going on right now, and Part 2 has honestly been pretty fire so far. But I would put this at probably like probably in the same tier as Slow Loop. I enjoyed watching it every week. Nothing too crazy in the first part, but I'd say the second part is definitely making things a lot more interesting, and it's been very entertaining to watch so far, and so I'm excited to see how that keeps going. But for part 1, I would say a solid lower B tier. I think Danmachi has grown so much as a series. From the first 2 seasons, you know, you have this wimpy ass main character, and season 3 kind of takes him and it whips him into shape so you can actually be a very compelling main character in season 4, and it's growing a lot of the other characters around him as well. It's just doing a lot better as a series right now, and I think season 4 having 2 parts, the 22 total episodes type of thing, is definitely helping it along the way. They're able to take a bit more time and, you know, flesh out a lot more of this dungeon that they're in with the characters that they have. So it's been a very entertaining season so far. I definitely suggest watching it if you've watched any of Danmachi so far. Now next up we have Summertime Rendering, which got probably one of the biggest shafts of the year, honestly. Just being in Disney jail for so long, it actually like just got released in the US, and so it got fucked over pretty hard. I feel really bad because it's a really good anime. I will say probably A tier for me. There are some things with the ending that I didn't really care too much for. I think the main villain motivation is kind of like spotty at best, but it's still a very entertaining anime, and the cast is great. I love the cast because there's not one single character really, besides like the comic relief people, who are dumb. And that's just common basic human sense is just such a joy to see in anime that you don't get to see very often. So when you see characters making a decision that's not like insanely big brain, but is just like generally smart, it's just such a joy to see. And I have no other words. It's just it's very entertaining story as well. I think watching it weekly was probably a better experience, but binging it, I feel like it's one of those things where you're gonna be like, okay, one more episode, and then one more episode, and then all of a sudden it's like 6 a.m. and you're still watching it, and you're like, well, fuck. So it's a very fun experience, and I really enjoyed it. Speaking of things that I really enjoyed was Bocchi the Rock, which I think was probably like third in terms of anime of the year for me. Now, I'll obviously talk about Bocchi the Rock more in my next video coming up, but I've also made a video on Bocchi the Rock as well. It was the first video for anime in fall that I made, and it was just, you know, ahead of Chainsaw Man. It was something that I felt even more passionate about than that. I absolutely love Bocchi the Rock. It's so good. Just the animation, the visual comedy, the music, the characters, it's such an endearing anime, and I've loved to see how much it's taken off, because it's making bank, I'm pretty sure. We're gonna be getting to season 2. Some of the Bocchi the Rock stuff is the highest viewed on Aniplex's channel, and it just came out, and it's something that's new, right? So it's not like Demon Slayer. Demon Slayer has like the most views on Aniplex's channel. Obviously, it's Demon Slayer. Bocchi the Rock just happened. It doesn't have as, you know, widespread of an audience, because, you know, more people are into shonen than they are into like cute girls doing cute things type of stuff. But Bocchi the Rock, if you haven't seen it, if you like slice of life, music, that type of stuff, I cannot suggest it enough. It's so good. Watch my video on it if you want to learn a little bit more. But it's such a good anime. I cannot express how much I love it enough. Now next up, something that I don't love that much is In the Land of Leodale. I don't remember anything that happened, I'm not gonna lie. It's just such a forgettable anime. It's not like the worst thing I've ever watched, but it's certainly just okay at best. It's an isekai that exists, that I watched, I guess, and I don't really have anything else to say about it. I don't suggest really watching it, unless you're like into the trash isekai thing, I guess, but it's just okay, I guess. Like a 5 out of 10 anime that I'll never talk about ever again other than this tier list. Now next up we have Girl from the Other Side, which is a crowdfunded OVA from Wit Studio that came with I think it was the final volume of the manga that came out, and they bundled it with that. It's not something I suggest watching unless you've read the manga, because it can get very confusing, because it speedruns the story a lot to complete it in an hour, and it's like 50-something chapters, I believe, in the manga. I've completed it, but it may be a bit confusing to anyone who hasn't read the manga, so I suggest doing that. The art style is great. I love the art style. I love the animation in this as well, because it takes that art style and it brings it to life in such an interesting way that you don't see in anime too much. And so it was fun to watch as someone who's read the manga, but I don't know how much people will get out of it unless they have. So I would probably put it like a solid C tier, just in general, but I enjoyed it for what it's worth. Now next up we have a reverse isekai this time, with The Devil's Apartheimer Season 2, which I will be throwing right into the D tier. Yeah, the art style does not really work, I feel like, with this anime, and not only was the art style bad, the animation was extremely spotty as well. And I don't feel like I got the type of comedy that we were used to in like the first season, where it was kind of like a lot of relatable comedy, because, you know, he's fucking working a part-time job at McDonald's or whatever. It just focused a lot more on like the story and world, and I feel like we didn't get a lot of that stuff in the middle that the first season had. They did get a third season confirmed, but they're probably just trying to like beeline for the end of the light novel, probably. I'm a little surprised they ever got one, considering it's been like 10 years, but, you know, it'd be like that, I guess. Just, it was something I watched. I was not too into it. Now next up, something else that I binged the entire series for before this came out was Yamano Susume, or Encouragement to Climb, which I put like it's like a high C tier, probably. It's not anything like insane, but it's a cute girls do cute things, but they climb mountains this time, which, you know, it's not like too inventive or anything, but it's fun. I had fun watching it. I watched the first 3 seasons with some friends, and I watched the rest weekly on my own, just so I wouldn't fall behind on it, but it was enjoyable. The first 4 episodes are recaps, so if you wanted to just watch this season, if you're interested in it, you could, but I really suggest just watching all the other stuff first. The first 3 seasons are all like half episodes. Then the last season here, their most recent season, was full episodes. So that's probably why they had the recap in there, just so they could transition to a full anime. But next up, we have another Cute Girls Do Cute Things, but this time it's DIY projects. And probably once again, it's like another C tier. I had fun watching it, and I got a funny gif out of it as well, but it's not like anything too crazy. It was fun to watch. I don't know how easy it would be to binge, but it was enjoyable to me, at least, to watch it every week. Just nothing insane, but it was goofy little DIY stuff. You don't learn too much from it, but you could probably eyeball some stuff and like get a general idea of how you might build some things, like maybe like a bookshelf or something like that. So it was fun. It was a fun little anime to watch. I don't regret it at all. But next up, we have Akubi Sailor Uniform, which once again we're just gonna be throwing that into the C tier. It was an anime that I watched, I guess, is the best way to put it. It had really great art. I think there's a lot of talk around the anime about would it be able to compete with like the manga's art. That's like the selling point of the manga, is that it has really good art. I would say Cloverworks did a pretty good job emulating that. It kind of went down if you watched Vivi, I would say it went down the route of like, it had pretty good animation like throughout, and art style throughout, but of course there are those moments where like hyper focus on something. Like Vivi was the eyes usually, where they draw like hyper realistic eyes, and but the same thing for Akubi, but just like you might get like a few scenes, not scenes, like I don't know how to describe it. They aren't still frames typically, but you know, you'll get some really well-made shots like splattered in there throughout, and I think you can just generally find to watch. I don't know how easily anyone could binge this. You probably have to watch it weekly, even though it's done, to be completely honest. It's not like anything too engaging, but I had fun watching it generally. But next up, we have Attack on Titan Final Season Part 2 of 4 at this point, which we've recently learned. But yeah, I mean, this is some of the better Attack on Titan content. We're getting towards the end of what I believe, well, we're like at the end of what I believe to be the good content. I have my own opinions on the manga's ending, but I definitely enjoyed what I believe to be some of the peak of the content. Season 3 Part 2 will forever be like my peak for Attack on Titan, but this content was great as well. I think Mappa did a really good job. You know, it's 4 less episodes they had to animate, and so they were able to make some things a little less spotty than the first part. It was just an overall generally good experience. Obviously, I have it in S tier, but you know, Attack on Titan, if at this point, if you watched it, you've watched it. If you haven't watched it, you know, I suggest it's worth watching. Even with the ending being what it is, I think it's still worth an experience. Just because of how good everything before the ending is. But next up, we have a couple of Kakus, which I'll be slapping right into the D tier. It honestly didn't start that bad. I heard how bad the manga was. I'm like, oh, it can't be that bad. And especially after like the start, I'm like, this is like a 7 out of 10 anime. It's not that bad. And then it got into like the second half of things, and I'm like, yeah, I see why no one really likes this that much. It's just not good. I can't say it's horrible either, but it's like, it's just really it does some dumb stuff. It's the best way to explain it without spoiling things. It's a very typical harem, I guess. There's nothing too interesting in there after the first like few episodes. It's just not really, it was not worth my time by the end of it. But something that I felt was generally worth my time was Dress Up Darling. I'd say Dress Up Darling is like probably like a very high C for me, like a low B. I think it has the potential to go somewhere very interesting. I just wasn't that compelled as other people by like the first season. I gave it like a solid 7 out of 10. I think it's good. I don't think it's on the same level as other people have put it. I think I'll be more interested maybe by later season content. I think for right now, it's just like pretty typical like romance, which with a good budget, and it has a girl that a lot of people liked considerably. But, you know, I just wasn't entirely into it as much as other things. I'd still say it's good, and I'm gonna get more into it potentially in another video at some point, but yeah, it just wasn't like anything too crazy. Next up we have Diamond, which I will also be putting into C tier. It was good. It's the best way. I liked it. It was cute. There's not too much to talk about it. Would probably be very difficult to binge, but I generally enjoyed the anime. It's just cute. That's the best way to put it. That's a lot of things I watch. It's a comfort show. You know, I love comfort shows splattered in between the other things that I watch. So yeah, not too much to say about it. It was a fun little watch. It's mainly comedy, but I think the art style was nice, like the painted backgrounds and stuff, like the watercolor. So I generally enjoyed it. Next up we have Dawn of the Witch, which is a spin-off of the Grimoire of Zero, and I'll be putting that right into D tier. The characters were so uninteresting, it's pretty insane. It's very like standard anime is the best I can say, and it just so happens to have characters from Grimoire of Zero, which is like a 7 out of 10 anime, but I just cannot say I was particularly interested in anything that it had to offer me. So yeah, just like a 5 out of 10 anime, I suppose. It's something I watched to completion. I didn't absolutely hate it, but it was not good. Now, something that I really did not like watching was Healer Girl, which I will also be putting into the D tier. Oh my god, I cannot speak today. Holy shit. I will also be putting into the D tier. I've not had any water. I have the water next to me, but I want to like take the pause because I'm not editing this video. This is going to be way too long to like properly edit. But yeah, Healer Girl is just not... It's like watching... I tried to binge it. I think that was my biggest mistake, is that I left it for later because I got a little bit behind. I'm like, you know what? I'll just binge it after it's done. Horrible idea. Because every episode is like a musical, basically, where their dialogue might get turned into a song, and it just gets really... I hate musicals a lot. Like that type, like just bursting the song randomly type of musical. It's just not for me. And this anime shoveled that point down even harder because it was just, or hammering it down harder. It was... Yeah, it was an anime that I watched, I suppose. One of the anime of all time. Next up, we have Overlord, which I will be putting also in the C tier. Overlord is like... Every season isn't bad, but I can never fully get into it. It's a really interesting world, but it's just... The human side of things, like, yeah, I know what's going to happen. Like, you're trying to show me this to, like, maybe get me emotionally attached to the humans, but I know what's going to happen to them anyway. And I know they're not going to win, so it's, like, difficult when they're like, oh, we're going to get stronger and stuff. I'm like, yeah, well, it's not going to mean anything, though. It's just hard to get too invested into that. And there's some stuff in, like, the world that we have yet to learn. I think the most interesting parts of Overlord have just been teased, as opposed to, like, fully fleshed out. So maybe we'll like it more once we get into the later seasons. It's got a movie that's in production right now, so maybe that movie will be something interesting to me, but we'll see. Next up we have Awashi, which is like probably the first proper sports anime I've watched. Like, you can like look at slowly because it's fishing as a sports anime. Grand Blue technically is diving, but not really. So this is like the first real sports anime I've watched, and I really enjoyed it. It's what I wanted from a sports anime. Instead of like right now Blue Lock's going on, it's like a lot of like shonen. It's like a shonen battle anime that... Battle shonen anime that's just disguised as a soccer anime. But this Awashi was like the technical side of soccer, along with like some of the mental and stuff, and I really enjoyed it for what it was. And it's got a lot more going on as well in terms of like characters and stuff, whereas Blue Lock is just kind of like go go go. So I enjoyed Awashi considerably for what I got from it. Like, you know, the typical like making fun of like what a sports anime would be like, just instead of like thinking for like 20 minutes and not having to move. I don't feel like I remember that happening too often, unless it was like between goals or after a game or something like that. Generally it was, you know, pretty fast-paced games, as opposed to like taking way too long because of how much they're thinking. It's difficult. The technical side of things was I enjoyed learning about soccer more than I enjoyed like just watching the monkey action type of stuff. Next up, we have the OVA for Maid Dragon. I watched all Maid Dragon at once with some friends. It was fine, I guess. I don't really remember the OVA that much. It was, you know, the little Valentine episode. But I'll put it like a C tier, I guess. I don't remember it too much. I can't really say anything about it. It was an OVA that existed. Now, next up, we have Parallel World Pharmacy, which honestly, I'll put in a C tier. It was like an entertaining little educational isekai to watch. And I think that kind of isekai has been cropping up a bit more recently, where they just take like a niche topic and they make an isekai about it. And I generally enjoyed it for what it's worth. You learn a little bit of medical stuff. It was not good. It's not bad either. I think it was fun. It was a fun little watch, and does not much more than that. I probably wouldn't suggest it, but I wouldn't like be like, no, don't watch that. It's a terrible idea. But next up we have what was this called? My mother's daughter is my stepsister. Or no, my ex is my mother's daughter. My mother's daughter is my ex. Something. Anyway, stepsister is his ex. fuck, I cannot remember the full name of that. It's too long. Light novels are too long with their names. But yeah, this anime, where it started, I thought it was gonna be about them like getting over each other. That's kind of how it like framed it at first, and then it like completely devolved from that and went a way that I did not like at all, and so I will be put it in the D tier. It will be painful to watch if it ever gets to season 2, which I kind of doubt it will. But yeah, too many of these very questionable anime have been releasing, and this one went like the full length of the field. So it was something, I guess. Next up we have Aharen. I put Aharen like a C. It was fun to watch, I think, weekly. I don't know if I could ever binge it, but Aharen was like a very chaotic type of comedy, which I think works very well in anime, and probably works maybe a little bit better in the manga. It's not like super well animated comedy type of thing, but it's like so random that you can't help but just look at the screen and be like, what the fuck is happening? And so I think it was generally fine. I would say I liked maybe towards the end a bit more where they got into the relationship side of things. It is a romance. I don't know if too many people like pegged it as one before, but there's the romantic element in there. Next up we have Takagi Season 3. I'm put Takagi in like a solid... Takagi's always like a solid like C tier type of anime, like 7 out of 10. You're never gonna like hate it or anything. I read the manga already, and so, or at least I'm caught up with it. I don't know how the hell it's not ended yet, but having read the manga, it maybe made it a little bit harder to watch every week because I knew what was going to happen every episode, basically. There's a movie as well. I don't think subtitles have come out for it yet. Maybe they have, and I just haven't been paying attention, but it's something that I think, it's a cute little series. I like the spin-off manga as well. But yeah, it's cute. Speaking of cute, we have the Yakuza Guide to Babysitting, which honestly I'll put in like a nice little B tier here. I really enjoy this anime. It has pretty production quality, which you typically come to expect from Studio Feel. They'll usually do pretty good. And it was cute. How Yaika did not make it onto the Must Protect award, I don't know. I guess this anime just wasn't as watched as others, which is unfortunate, but yeah, it's just really... I would suggest watching it if you like just wholesome stuff. It's a very unwholesome profession turned into something wholesome. And I think generally character stuff is pretty fine. It's not like groundbreaking or anything, but I enjoyed watching it every week. It was cute. A little bit of a soul healer. And next up we have Shadow's House Season 2, which I'll also be putting into the B tier. I really liked the setup for like Season 1 and such. And I think Season 2 just expanded a lot more on the idea of Shadow's House and some of the stuff that goes on in it. It's just good. I liked it. I'll read the manga eventually, but if you haven't seen Shadow's House, I think it's a very interesting premise. It might look a little like... The art style maybe look a little cutesy at first, but yeah, I think it's a very interesting and intriguing show to look at. But next up we have Management of a Novice Alchemist, which was fine, I suppose. I'll probably put in C tier because I enjoyed it, watching it more than these down here, but I wouldn't say it's like quality-wise on the same level as any of these, really, for the most part. It was... Sometimes the animation would go crazy. It was like really random spurts of just like really good animation in some fights, which I'm like, okay then. It didn't really use CGI for its big creatures either, probably because it's like typically like a slower anime. It's a world where kind of like makes its rules up as it's a very like soft magic system with alchemy and stuff. It's just... It was fine to watch weekly. I don't know if I'd ever suggest anyone go back and watch it, but I liked watching it every week generally. Speaking of things I liked watching weekly that weren't that great, but I liked it. The Reincarnated as a Sword was an endearing anime, and it's getting to Season 2, and honestly, I'll have fun with Season 2. I'm kind of excited. It's not like good. It's not bad. I've said it's not good, but it's not bad. I could never say it's good, but it's enjoyable to watch, and it takes its time with the source material, which I think is definitely like a good thing. I don't know what's in the source material, but I know it went through 2 novels as opposed to the typical like 3 or 4 that some anime do. It's just, I think the less novels you can do is generally going to be better because you're going to be expanding a lot more, especially with the fantasy anime. To expand on your world is to basically make your series much more appealing to people who like the fantasy genre, because the world is like one of the most important parts. And speaking of fantasy, we have How a Realist Hero Rebuilt the Kingdom Part 2. Which, part 2 started pretty good, but then it, like, completely devolved into, like a harem type of thing. I wasn't, like, too interested in. I don't really remember too much of what happened towards the end of the season either. But I remember being generally, like, engaged in the first bit of the season, and then I wasn't like too interested in the back half. Like a 6.5 out of 10, 6 out of 10 type of anime. It wasn't bad, but it's really not. I wouldn't say it's worth watching over some other isekai, you know. But next up, we have something that's definitely worth watching with Mob Psycho Season 3. Had to cave in, drink a little bit of water there. Mob Psycho Season 3, I'll put in like a high B. I think Season 2 is considerably better than any of the other seasons. Season 3 was still good. I'd say it's like Season 2, Season 3, Season 1 in terms of like how good each season was. But I really enjoyed Mob Psycho. I think there's some episodes where I'm like, okay, I'm like too interested in what's going on here. Like the alien episode was really, it was goofy and fun, but I wasn't engaged in it too much. I'm like, what the fuck is happening the whole time, instead of like really actively taking anything in. And obviously there were some good like parts of it. It was a goofy setup for what is supposed to be like a character moment, but I just was not too engaged with it. But Mob Psycho, if you haven't seen it, I highly suggest watching it. The production quality on it's really good. We had some really good animation moments this season, but I just don't think none of the character moments really like match up to Season 2 for me. I think that was like the biggest thing. Like Season 2 started really strong, and had some strong moments in the middle and the end. It was just a great season of Mob Psycho, and I just don't feel like Season 3 was quite that, but I still really, really enjoyed it. But next up we have Tokyo 24th Ward, which was an anime I watched, I guess. It's an anime original from Cloverworks, and it was well produced, but I wouldn't say it's like too compelling of a story or anything. It tries to make like a generally, I think it's like an interesting idea about like how much surveillance is too much, stuff like that. It has some interesting ideas, it just didn't execute on them very well. And so I wasn't like too invested in there. And some of the character stuff, I really feel like the guy in the blue hair there in the middle, he was just not very interesting as like the main character. And the two other mains kind of get like sideshowed a little bit because they have to focus on him and the conflict between the other two. It's like, it's trying to juggle around a lot of different things in like 12 episodes, or was it 13? I don't remember. But in one core, it's just, there are too many things to try to juggle around, and I just don't think it worked too well. But it wasn't a bad watch or anything. Next up, we have Arknights, Prelude to Dawn. I would put the Arknights, I think the production quality alone probably puts it in the B tier. It's not like the most compelling anime of all time. I think it'll be more interesting as it goes on. I haven't played the game really. I did play it for like, I had it installed for 2 days, and then I'm like, I'm not really too interested in it. There's a lot of, it's a tower defense game, so I thought I was going to be interested in it, and then I ended up not really being at all, just because of how much like attention I would have to put into like the dailies and stuff like that. There's a lot going on in the game that I just didn't feel like I wanted to learn. But the anime was well produced. It's getting another season already, so they're putting that gacha money to work with producing these seasons. So I'll watch it when it comes out. 8 episodes is like a little difficult, but I don't know too much about like the story, so I don't know if they paced it well or not. There's just not too much that I know about the source, so there's not a lot I can say about how well it was adapted, other than it had good production quality. Next up, we have Irodori Midori. It was an anime, I guess. Probably put it in the F tier here. It was like, it's very unfair of me to put it in the F tier probably, but it's not good. It's an anime that it has 8 episodes. They're all like 3 minutes, and you get one song out of it in the end, and it was like probably not worth my time. But I wanted to watch something randomly on a whim, and this ended up being it. But next up, we have this is the first season of Spy Family. I would put this in like an A tier. I made a video on Spy Family as well. It's like probably the first video on my channel to ever do like exceptionally well in comparison to my channel size. So I'm definitely indebted to Spy Family in some way, but like I said, you can't really hate on Spy Family really. It's just a good, entertaining show, especially the first part. I have my gripes with like the second, which I'll talk about later. But yeah, I think the first part was very entertaining and fun. I think the foundational part of it is probably why it was more compelling to me than the second part, but once again, we'll get into that in a minute. Next up, we have Tomodachi Game, which honestly I thought was going to be like one of the worst watches of the year, but it kind of saved itself after the first couple games. First 2 games, I was like, I hate literally all these characters. I cannot root for anyone here. I think it's more compelling after that, but yeah, it just, one of those things where it's, you know, edge bait kind of. I wasn't like too interested even after it got a little bit better. It was a fine watch, but nothing too insane. Now next up we have Tonikaku Kawai's OVA, which is like C tier. I love Tonikaku Kawai, it's one of my favorite manga, but it's, you know, it's just an OVA of an episode, and there's just not like too much I can say about it. Despite another OVA that is about to come up here that I thoroughly enjoyed, and we'll talk about a little bit more than the other OVAs that I have. But next up first, we have Call of the Night, which I'll put in a solid B tier. Call of the Night's background work is like so mesmerizing to watch. I don't know if I was gonna watch Call of the Night at first. I'm like, I don't know if I'm too interested in watching. I'm already watching a good amount of stuff for the season, and so I was gonna pass on it. And then I saw the background. I'm like, holy shit, that is so good. And so I picked it up. The art was really good. I actually ended up becoming more invested in the world of Call of the Night than I was the like romance between the characters. It's a very like, it's a fun little anime to watch. I think you got some extra time on your hands. It's worth a check out. It's something that it makes sense that its world is interesting, because it's one of those things where like, oh, it's just like a premise setup type of thing, and you don't think too much about it. But then it's like, oh, this world, obviously there are things in this world that make sense to, like, that they're there that you wouldn't really think about in a romance series that still has to deal with, and I really enjoyed that. But next up we have the Mushoku Tensei OVA with the Goblin Slaying, which was, I'd say I probably put in like a B tier. It was a good OVA. Most OVAs you watch don't really mean anything, but this one was like canon content, introduced a character, it had a really good animated fight, and so I was invested in it. It's a very good OVA. It's worth your time for sure to go watch that. It's think of it more like a special episode than an OVA, I suppose. But yeah, I'd say if you already watched Mushoku Tensei and you didn't know this existed, I would, you know, go watch that, obviously. But next up we have Kong Ming. I'd say Kong Ming is like a higher C tier probably. I really enjoyed it. It kind of exploded over its OP, which I think got a little too overhyped, but it was generally an enjoyable experience to watch Kong Ming. It was fun. It was fun every week. I don't regret watching it whatsoever. I don't think I'd ever talk it up too much like some other people do, but I had fun with it. I kind of wish that sometimes they'd use a different song than like two, but you know, it's how it is. I guess it's like, it probably wasn't the most popular manga ever, especially, I don't even know if it was after this. Maybe it was. I don't know. But I wouldn't mind another season of it, because I think there's some interesting things they could do. But yeah, I had fun with Kong Ming, but I just don't think it's like anything too crazy, especially not to go above C tier. But next up we have More Than a Married Couple, Less Than Lovers. I'd put in a D tier. It's like kind of shitty, like romance harem type of thing. This is more of a love triangle than a harem, but it's just, the romance moves too fast. I hate how fast the characters like move through things. I think it could have been a much more interesting premise in the hands of a better like written story and characters. It just doesn't really take advantage of its premise that much. It's like an excuse to like get two people in a room together, and just goes from there, kind of like ignores all the other aspects of it. Yeah, it's just, it was not something I cared too much for to watch each week. I'd read a little bit of the manga before. I don't know. It's just a very okay series. If you liked it, good for you, but I couldn't really get into it. Now, Bubble was something I'll put in like a low C tier. I can't put it in D tier, just how good it looks. It would be like a travesty to put it in D, especially with the music as well. Music and animation saved this from being a D tier. The story and characters were just so like standard and lazily written that I just couldn't really get into it. It's like really on the nose with its story as well. It's just, I expected more from like the script writer. Is the same guy as Fate Zero, which I think is like it's one of the highest anime I have rated on my list, and it's just not something that was entertaining. Well, it was entertaining, but it wasn't like an engaging story. The characters weren't that engaging. You were just kind of looking at the animation and be like, wow, that's really fucking good, and you like the music as well. And so you're watching it, but you weren't like, by the end of it, you're like, okay, yeah, that's something I watched, and you'll probably never think about it again, other than like, yeah, Bubble was pretty good, like good looking, and that's about it. I think my favorite like little review of it was, Bubble is like the name, beautiful on the outside, but filled with nothing but air on the inside, and that is about as accurate as it gets. Next up we have the second part of Spy Family, which I'd probably put like a high C tier. It was just not as, like, I like the dog stuff, but then it's kind of fell off from there. I just was not interested in some of the stuff that they were doing. I think Spy Family is at its most interesting when it's like trying to move forward with the story. Obviously, I love slice of life, don't get me wrong, but I just don't feel like the slice of life for Spy Family is as compelling to me with the set of characters that we have, because you have a unique set of circumstances, right? And so when you're not taking as advantage of them, it's just not that interesting. And when it tried to do it with, you know, the tennis arc or whatever, which probably would have been more interesting, if I just did not like the new character they introduced, and so it kind of killed that arc for me a little bit. And next up, we have Dr. Stone special episode. Put that in the B tier. Dr. Stone is like a solid 8 out of 10 every time. It's an entertaining anime. You learn a little bit as you watch it as well. If you haven't seen Dr. Stone, just go watch it. I can't say too much about the special episode, obviously, without spoiling it, because it's like technically like it's past season 2 content. It's canon content as well, so you have to go watch it before season 3. Make sure you go do that. Next up, we have Komi season 2, which is like C tier. Komi is like one of those things where it's like I'm fine watching it, but some of the characters in there are just so insufferable that I can't like think of it as any higher than like a solid 7 out of 10 anime. It's just a pretty good production quality. There's some spotty moments, I suppose, but yeah, it's just the character. Some of the side characters really hold the anime back from being too interesting. Next up, we have Kaginato, which I'll also put in season 3. It's like little chibi shorts of like key works and stuff. So if you haven't seen any key stuff, then it's not something you'd ever want to watch. But if you have, then I think it's a little fun chibi short anime comedy that I suggest watching. Just short, very short episodes, like a few minutes long each, I believe. So you could watch both seasons in the amount of time it would take you to watch like maybe like 2.5, 3 anime episodes. Next up, we have Licorice Recoil, which I'll be putting here probably in the A tier, maybe like a B. I'll put it in the A tier. I think just entertainment alone and how much I enjoyed it, like, puts it in the A tier. I think the direction at the end, I wasn't like too big of a fan of. They got a little lazy, I think, at the end with some of the stuff that they were doing, but I generally enjoyed it, and it very well could get a season 2 at some point, because it was a very popular anime that made a lot of money. And, you know, there's another original anime from A1 in here that had a lot of money spent on it, but isn't going to return that same amount. So I think this will probably get another season at some point. They just need to probably figure out how they're going to do it, because they didn't really set it up for one, but it has the well, they kind of did, but it definitely has the opportunity to get one, but we'll see how that goes. But I made a video on this as well, so if you want to know my full thoughts on Licorice, for the most part, I made it before it ended, obviously, but it was still something that I think stands true to this point. Next up, we have Prima Doll, which I'll put in like a D tier. Prima Doll was like generally fine to watch each week, but I think it had a lot more potential than what it like actually output. It was just a fine little watch. You got some songs out of it, and it's cute girls do cute things, but didn't really like. It had a premise that could have been expanded more on that I don't think it really did too much. Next up, we have Classroom of the Elite season 2. Putting like the seats here. So I think Classroom of the Elite definitely had like, if it followed the source material better, had a much better chance of being like a B and above. But it didn't really get any good production quality until like the second half of the season, which is, it's not like, you know, it got like it was like marginally worse in the first half. It was noticeably pretty bad in the first half because of all the outsourcing that they did. And in the Blu-ray, a lot of things get fixed, but I didn't watch the fucking Blu-ray, and that's the biggest problem. You shouldn't have to wait for a Blu-ray to get the product you should have gotten to begin with. It's like games, like updating a year after they come out to be good. It's too much time wasting on that type of stuff. But next up, there's the little Pokemon shorts that were made by Wit Studio. I'm calling like a C tier. Nothing like too crazy. All of them together would be like the length of an episode of anime. So if you like Pokemon, probably go watch those. It's like a Legends Arceus type of little thing, which I think is like an interesting like look on Pokemon, but you know, it's nothing too crazy. Next up, we have the farm-related skills. It's not isekai, surprisingly. I thought it was going to be actually about farming. It was not. It was bad. It was really bad. Some of the worst CGI. I will say, watch the first 5 minutes, if nothing else. It's just some of the funniest shit you'll ever see in anime, then it's just bad after that. It's just, yeah, I don't know. I technically touched on it a little bit in my fall 2022, like, in 7 minutes, but yeah, it's an anime that exists for some reason, unfortunately. But next up, we have Engage Kiss. Engage Kiss was an interesting one. I'm gonna put it in the D tier. It started off like not that good, like a C tier, and then it evolved into like a solid B tier anime, and that was getting really interesting. And then it devolved horrendously back into a D tier, which is unfortunate. I think it had an opportunity to be good, and it missed it, unfortunately. You'll see a lot of that, I guess, with originals, which I'll talk about in a minute again here, but it wasn't that great at all. Next up, we have second season Orient. Fuck Orient. I hated the second season more than the first. Yeah, both Orients were something I absolutely despised. I think season 2 did... I was gonna say season 2 was better than season 1 until the end of season 2. I'm like, what the fuck are we doing, dude? It's just like, I don't know. It's not something I enjoy. And I heard Magi's good. It's from the same guy who did Magi. And I'm going to watch Magi one day. And I really hope it's nothing like Orient. And I'm pleasantly surprised. Because I just don't feel Orient is that good in any capacity. Next up, we have the RWBY anime, which is like a D tier. The fight scenes in like the first 3 episodes were really well done. And that was just a bait to get you to watch the rest of it. Until like the last episode where they actually did have a decent fight. Like the last couple episodes, they had decent stuff in there, but yeah, it was just the definition of mid. I have nothing else to say about it. It was just really, it was new content to expand on the world, but it was kind of ass. So it didn't really, I don't know. The actual RWBY material isn't that great either, but Shaft did not do any better in terms of the expansion that they made. Next up, we have Love Flops, which is another original anime. Be putting that in the D tier. It was, it has its twist, and the twist I think was really interesting, but I don't feel like they took it as seriously as they needed to because of the content of the anime. I think it needed, I don't know. I think it needed, if it was a more serious anime instead of just like really horny and goofy, then it might have drawn more eyes potentially. But instead, it was just kind of like, you know, typical harem until the twist happens and you're like, oh shit. But by that point, like, no one's watching, so it doesn't really mean that much. But then finally, we have the ASMR Isekai reincarnation thing, which I don't even know how to describe it. I talked about it on the podcast a little bit. If you want to hear my thoughts on it, then you'll have to go there, because I'm just not even going to bother talking about it here. But yeah, that's my little tier list here. We have mostly everything in C, which is like you typically expect. B and D have a pretty good distribution. F, probably more things than I ever would have liked to see in there. And then, you know, not too much at the very top here. But I had some things, like, some of my favorite things I've ever watched really have been from this gear. Like, Kaguya, Bocchi the Rock, Made in Abyss Season 2, it's just all so good. And there's some things I'm really excited for to see the future of, like Chainsaw Man's anime's future. Mushoku, I'm excited to see more of that coming up soon this year. It's just all generally good from, like, the C tier and above, I would say. There's some things in D tier that I don't regret watching, but I just didn't have that much of an interest in putting them in like C tier. But yeah, if you enjoyed this little video here, I only really do this once a year. I might go back to doing it for every season. I don't know for sure, but maybe it's a potential thing. But I'm not too keen on doing these all the time. But I did enjoy this year of anime. I have another video coming up, like I said, about the top 10 best new anime for this year, which not all those choices will reflect this tier list, so it'll be a bit different from that. But yeah, thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed, like and subscribe, and I will see you in another video. I usually do essays, so this is a bit different from the typical. Thank you and goodbye.